Da 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 da, generic
Ta-da.
theme song until we get an actual theme song. Da 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 da.
I had
Oh
a
God,
little
that
echo
like
effect there.
that
just to make
echo.
sure
Yeah, I
even
needed to mute
nicer.
the stream. So you had the stream on too, because I heard
I could
heard
hear him
it echoed.
singing, so I thought I'd make it echo.
Dude, it echoed three times for me. I had it on the stream. I had it on in the obviously here on Discord, and then it's looped because Linko had the sound on too.
It was beautiful.
That's just how you make for a really good theme song. A lot of distortion, a lot of echo, a lot of wah-wah, a lot of phaser.
Even if that's been copyright claimed, I don't think any bot's going to be able to detect that one.
Copyright claim what? That's original. I'm putting in a copyright with The Office right now as we speak, as we're doing the show. So
And because automation sucks, we'll get claimed by our own content.
Of course we will. And then I'm not going to release it. I'm going to hold it hostage and then just make a story out of it and take Twitch to court, or take Twitch to Twitter court, and I'm not going to let it go until they release Dr. Disrespect from his gulag.
Right, we don't know what's going on there, so the less said, the better. It could be anything.
Yeah, it could be.
Speaking of things,
that could be so poorly aged, and I will regret it next week. But whatever, it's a joke.
Nothing we can't rescind.
Speaking of poorly aged things and dead things, and not Madonna for a change. Today's topic, we're talking about revival.
I thought you said poorly aged.
Madonna's pretty poorly aged. We're talking about revival genres, mainly like revival shooters. You've seen the likes of New Blood Interactive publishing a lot of stuff like Dusk and Medieval, that kind of really propelled the genre back into old school principles. But also, I'm going to be talking about some genres that are arguably no longer with us. Press F. Although one of the things I was going to say about this was kind of mute now because of EA's recent dealings, but that'll come up later on. I don't know what exactly people would claim would be the exact definition of a revival piece, or what even a dead genre would be. So I'll let either Dust or Charles jump in with their definitions, and then you can contrast and compare.
In the genre of streaming platforms, Mixer.
True.
Is that a genre or a brand, though?
That's a brand. It's not a genre. That was in poor taste.
No, not in poor taste. I mean, we can laugh at the bloated dead corpse of the failed streaming platform.
Yeah, I think it's more about laughing at Microsoft for once again giving up on something without trying. But alas, we'll move on to genres, I guess.
Well, the definition of a revival game. We'll go with that first. We'll both we'll all compare and contrast our thoughts on what makes and constitutes a revival, and then we'll move on to death. So it's like the circle of life: revive, sort of. I know it's like born and then death.
Yeah. All right. So if we're going to be talking about revivals, then one thing that I like to look at is the amount of time something's been out of the limelight. And how long it's kind of been depopularized. And my go-to example for this sort of genre is typically is the CRPG Renaissance, where for a long time the sort of isometric 2.5D party system or party role-playing games with your inventory management, your dialogue systems, popularized by like Baldur's Gate and Planescape Torment and the like, were the norm for computer role-playing games, or just role-playing games in general. And sort of when Morrowind and the Elder Scrolls gained in popularity, that sort of started to build the mold of what an RPG is. And of course, as all things, consoleization creeps into the PC space, and you see less and less of that old school design philosophy and more of what you expect out of modern action role-playing games. Well, thanks to Kickstarter and thanks to the success of indie projects, and I had this discussion on Twitter. It was like a couple tweets back and forth, but with Felipe Pepe, who ended up writing the CRPG roleplay or the CRPG book chronicling the history of computer role-playing games from their advent to like I think it's 2011 or 2012 or something like that. He says that it really started with The Legend of Grimrock, and then the release of Legend of Grimrock's the sequel, and after that was Pillars of Eternity, its Project Eternity on Kickstarter, its massive popularity, and that sort of got the ball rolling. Personally, while I think that Grimrock is good, I don't think it captured the mindset of the internet in the same way that Pillars of Eternity did. So I kind of see Pillars of Eternity as that starting point of revitalizing computer role-playing games. And so look what happened after Pillars of Eternity. We had more games in that style than we did in the old school dungeon crawler style, a la Eye of the Beholder. So you have Pillars of Eternity, you have Torment, Tides of Numenera, Wasteland 2, now Wasteland 3 is coming out, Pillars of Eternity 2 is coming out, and we have all of the enhanced editions coming out of the old BioWare games, now rights owned by Beamdog. Baldur's Gate 3 is coming out. Divinity Original Sin 2 took the world by storm with putting their own spin on that style. And so you see this kind of revival of these old school role-playing games being able to break the barriers where before they were very much isolated to the PC space. So for me, it's something of a timeline where you have a game that's very, very popular for a while, and for one reason or another, it stops being popular, like what's happening with RTSs right now. And then again, there's a period of banking on nostalgia where the people who grew up with those games are now able to help finance the newer ones or show a market interest in them. And so there's a swing to bring them back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and other things. I want to get into non video game for just a second to talk about role playing games. I would argue that for the most part, what took a lot of people by surprise was perhaps 5e of D&D. That kind of exploded as well, for better or worse. To each their own. But it went from old school niche to now it's. I don't want to say it's mainstream, but it kind of feels that way compared to where it was, right?
You mean like D&D? Yeah, D&D. It's
D&D.
tabletop role-playing games are now more popular than they've ever been.
I would agree, and definitely online too.
And I don't know if that's the accessibility of 5e or if that's just really good marketing. But I think that thanks to that, it has certainly helped push role-playing games as a genre much more forward.
Absolutely.
I think there was more exposure as well.
To a point.
There was obviously the whole thing with Stranger Things. A lot of people started talking about D&D again after they saw it in Stranger Things. So it's kind of like the influence of wider media coming in. There's some things kind of banked on there. Because Stranger Things, depending on what you think of it, a lot of that show is essentially built on nostalgia. So it's no surprise because they had the D&D thing. They had some retro games based on that. They had was it Crystal Pepsi, I think, relaunched recently to do with Stranger Things. So it's kind of curious, but I think what you said about the RPG thing is pretty much what I would have said when a genre, or at least a style of game, because talking about FPS is obviously my jam. When a style of FPS is kind of evolved and it becomes something into kind of like we had the whole change with Half-Life. Things weren't anymore. They weren't just like an arena and here's a wave of enemies, and then from there we had a bit more cinematic, and then kind of went too cinematic. We had the whole rise of the World War II shooter with Saving Private Ryan's a huge influence, and then Band of Brothers, Call of Duty, which came out of the kind of jaded nature a lot of developers were feeling working on them kind of games. And then that led to the next generation of what was considered the norm for FPS. And now we kind of come full circle where the old arena style is now seen as a revival thing. And even after that, we're now coming closer and closer to like the Half-Life revival style. So I think the idea of something being the norm and being highly popular and then dropping out the subconscious of the mainstream or the wider appreciation is... I think that's a pretty good way to describe the idea of a genre not exactly being dead, as we're going to speak about before, but being revived because of memories of the past. The older you get, the more influence you find in the things you grew up with, and I think we're starting to see that now, especially with the recent Steam event where we had demos like Gloomwood. Not Gloomwood. It is Gloomwood. Gloomwood? Yeah, Gloomwood.
Yeah.
I keep saying Gloomhaven, Gloomwood, and that's obviously inspired by Thief, and it's pretty cool to see this kind of approach coming back. But yeah, I think you nailed it with the idea of what a revival.
Yeah, there's part of that, and there's also game styles. So even if genres don't die necessarily, certain styles of genres do, and I don't know if they're both considered the same genre, or if the subgenres are just so different that they're different. But if you like different genres, but if you look at strategy games, 4Xs have been incredibly popular for a long time now, thanks entirely to the Civ series and massive popularity there. But people who go into 4Xs, they go in hard. RTSs are only now sort of making a comeback after a real time in limbo, where we have seen, thanks to the relaunch of games like Age of Empires 2 on PC, that there's a market for people wanting to play that old style of RTS. And so Age of Empires 2 was remade a second time from HD to a total remake, and Age of Empires 1 did the same thing, and now we have Command and Conquer. And Grey Goo failed because it came out at a time when RTSs were more or less dead in the water and nobody wanted to explore them. We had the launch of Warcraft 3, where they tried to capitalize on that trend and just turn it into a tournament, into a tournament esport, and fuck that whole thing up. Thank you, Blizzard. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, things like that set a genre back. I mean, I don't think it will in this case, but it can, right?
It can, but it's worth remembering, like, you know, even I think a lot of people think, especially now that RTS has kind of died out in the late 90s, but, you know, Ubisoft was still making some big stuff. World and Conflict, that was it. That was a big release for Ubisoft. It was even connected in with their previous games. I think you can get some ghost units in there, and it's some way linked to some other stuff. They try to make a cohesive world out of it, but it was like one of their big poster boys, and they were, you know, it's a big release for them. But I think you have to look at the impact of other genres, and especially trends, consumer trends. Obviously, more and more people are kind of, at the time, were clamoring for multiplayer stuff. So the rise of MOBAs, this is how I feel anyway, the rise of MOBAs really seemed to put a dent in both the MMO market and also the RTS market, because, you know, these RTSs were kind of living off multiplayer. There wasn't a lot of stuff that was coming out based purely on the single player. Companies were looking at the success of StarCraft as an esport and thinking, okay, well, our RTS can have single player and still do well, but we would like to have it as a long-reaching game that has years and years and years and years and years of legs in it through the multiplayer. And then MOBAs came out, and suddenly it was like, oh, well, let's change our focus into this. And I guess you could kind of say that Warcraft 3 is responsible for that, inadvertently, of course. So it's kind of funny to see Blizzard try and revive the genre that they, by revive, I say that somewhat begrudgingly, try and revive the genre.
Dead. All like games still come out for them. Like, for instance, I just said the RTS genre was dead when really it wasn't. You had, like you said, World in Conflict, you had Company Heroes, so you had games coming out for it, but it was not nearly at the zenith that it was in 2000.
I think when we say dead, we're not saying that there's nothing ever coming out. We're just saying in terms of popularity, it's very low. So I think this is a
limited games and popularity, right?
Yeah,
to where
we're being
it feels
hyperbolic.
like you as a fan, it feels like something you love is coming to an end, even though it's not. It feels that way, and,
like Heroes of Storm,
definitely
for
felt
example. Like Heroes of Storm, I don't play anymore because it's dead. They just brought out May from Overwatch in there, but that's been the first big content update in a long time, and there's a skeleton crew working on it. So as a player, I see that game as dead. Of course, people still playing it, so it's a level of being hyperbolic. So that's the kind of approach we're taking. When we say dead, we don't mean that no one's playing it and they're not making any of that genre at all. It's just in terms of popularity and what's kind of considered a viable release to the wider audience.
And there might be some exceptions where something actually is dead, but yeah,
Lawbreakers.
More often than not, we're more often than not, though, it's definitely hyperbole.
Still born.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But going back to the RTS, it's kind of cool to see EA, you know, and I think we mentioned this last week. We can talk about EA's treatment of Westwood Studios in general, and it will always end up with a negative result, you know, because it wasn't great what happened there. But at the same time, we have to kind of move on from that and talk about the current situation. And I have to say, I've been playing the Command & Conquer remaster for the past week, a little bit on stream. Very impressed with it. It's robust. It has everything you could want as a Command & Conquer fan, even if you missed out on some stuff. It even has the console missions, which is ridiculous. And I played Command & Conquer for the first time on PS1 when I was a wee boy, so it's kind of cool to see that there. And do I think it will lead to like a a revitalization of the RTS genre? Not really, but at the same time, I don't think it really needed that, because there's still a lot of options there, and that's the another thing we have to kind of look at is the changes of culture and consumer habits again through video games. So we mentioned this about RPGs, and it's a lot to do with how we see classic RPGs versus modern day RPGs. So, for example, someone grew up only playing Skyrim. That's their idea of an RPG, and
Yeah.
we can't say anything against that because that's not their fault. It's the same way that if you grew up in the early 2000s, your idea of really cool edgy music was new metal. It's all to do with what you grew up and what you surround yourself with. So when we say, well, the RTSs are dead, it's nice to see these old companies, well, not old companies, these companies bring back old IPs away from just being shelled out for mobile games, as we saw Command and Conquer again. And now they're in a viable place where if you want to play it, you don't have to go on eBay and find an old copy and then try and run through the rigmarole of getting it to run. You can just go and it's on Steam there, and it's for a good price. So the genre
just works.
Exactly. The genre isn't dead, obviously, fully, because there's still options there that are playable, but it's very much low key popularity, and I think these Command and Conquer is a great example of how the industry can kind of not make a huge attempt to rebuild it and say, look, RTSs are back, because I just don't think we're ever going to get that point again. Things have changed a lot, but there's always going to be the option there where you can at least revisit it.
Yeah, they're incredibly niche, a lot
Yeah.
of these. The reason that they are dead, quote unquote, is because they don't appeal to a wide audience.
Mhm.
And the reason that they go out of popularity is precisely for that reason. It's why when you see like, oh, there's no new games out, everything's always the same. Well, yeah, in the AAA sphere, or if you think that games are too long these days, in the AAA sphere, they're all the same because that's your mass market popularity. If you step outside of that bubble and you sort of look at games that aren't published by the big publishers, or even some that are, but like are more on a smaller scale focus that aren't,
You have
earmarked
some other
for
smaller
smaller-
developers.
Yeah. You will find games that are shorter length, but then are not engineered to be million market sellers. And then they have their corners and they're nice and polished and they focus on the things that people who are really ingrained into these communities want out of those games.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious when we talk about AAA that, and I don't mean this in a cynical way, although it is easy to be cynical about these things, but I think it's worth remembering that AAA stuff is, at the end of the day, a product. I mean, all video games are technically a product, but video game AAA, because of the production costs, because of marketing
Not
costs.
all. Some games aren't a product. Some games are a service.
Oh.
Which are still a product.
And we'll
It's a
talk about
continuing
that
product.
sometime. Yes.
But the AAA sphere it's built on such a large, inflated industry when it comes to the top end stuff. Like everything costs so much, and marketing costs so much, and you have all the other little minor things in between. So they have to produce these games to be the largest appeal possible. And
at the same time, they worry that if people do play them, they don't want people to miss out on content. So they either make it as open world as possible so you can see everything and make it a collectathon, basically, speaking of dead genres, or it's so linear that it just kind of forces you to go down this direct path so you see everything it has to offer without skipping a beat. So it kills any sense of exploration or mystery.
And it kind of leads to everything. I wouldn't say everything being the same because that's a bit unfair. You can get like 5 AAA games,
but I mean,
side
like,
by side, they're different.
I've heard people say, "Oh, everything's the same." Well, no, it's not. But I can see why you think that. And well, let's look at the PlayStation 5 launch. Not one single new IP was launched or was named during that press show. Everything was a sequel because it's more profitable to make a sequel or add to an existing IP than it is or to create a brand new IP.
The Spider-Man one wasn't even a sequel. It was just the game that currently came out with some extra content. But
exactly.
I guess this kind of dives into the whole aspect and prospect of how do AAAs approach this. But in terms of our topic, this is what essentially leads to genres dying and being less popular because the hot new thing suddenly becomes the most profitable thing. So everyone just kind of leaves everything else. They just like chuck the baby out with the bathwater. Let's do this new thing, then let's do this new thing, and we keep seeing it. There's always a genre that we kind of ends up as the role of the poster boy. So the console, the early consoles. So I'm not going to go as far back as Atari, etc., etc. Let's say NES, SNES, Mega Drive. It was all like side-scrolling stuff because that was the biggest sellers. It was the stuff that showed off the hardware the best. And then you moved on to, let's say, like PS1. You had some like platformers, some third-person stuff, some JRPGs especially.
Yeah, like the collectible platformers. Yep.
And which also got revival recently. And then you jump to like more contemporary stuff, and it was like all FPS because that was the thing that really showed off your consoles. Oh, look how powerful it is. Exactly. It's
standardized.
It's obviously just the nature of video games, and people buy these, so that's what they want, and the consumer is the thing that kind of drives the demand.
Or if you want to look at it from a PC perspective,
yeah,
the fact that before first-person shooters became a genre, you know what they were called? Doom clones, because they cloned Doom. I mean, like, if you want to talk about a trend, that's more than a trend. Doom was a movement. But yeah, like, everything kind of popularized on that style of gameplay, and that was what sold the most. It's why John Romero, for the first like half of his career, made first-person shooters.
I mean, he's still even running on that with a Sigil. The whole Sigil thing. That's fine. Well, of course, we're not mentioning that in a bad light. We just kind of put a bit of a perspective on how genres kind of become quote-unquote dead, and how things kind of, result in games coming out and being labeled as revival things. So like when Dusk came out and suddenly, it's not purely the cinematic FPS thing. It's like, it's kind of old 90s style, and it's nice and quick, and it has all the same DNA, and okay, I guess this is a revival shooter. And then we had a medieval on top of that, and then we have stuff like Project Warlock, which is a little bit in between, etc., etc. And it's a nice pattern to see, I have to say. And then you kind of see the revival of old genres and the kind of mainstays. So Shadow Warrior, and that got remade, which we didn't actually mention on the remake episode. It's a completely different experience, but it's obvious that there's still interest in these old IPs. Although I guess you could argue that Shadow Warrior is so completely different to what it used to be that it's not really anything to do with the IP in general.
No, but that came out at the same time that the original was given the Redux.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know if it was packaged together, but I know that a lot of people did look into going to Shadow War. And I think it was the same time Duke was released on PC or on Steam the first time around with Atomic Edition, or Megaton Edition, rather.
A lot of Dukage.
Yeah, a lot of Dukage. And like to that point, Imtoria and Chat's right. Like, this is a good way for people who aren't familiar with it to become familiar with it, which is what you get out of Shadow Warrior or Command and Conquer or whatever. Because for whatever reason, I find there's a lot of apprehension for people to want to try to play old games.
I think especially on PC, because there's that idea that it's difficult to get it running, and there is some truth in that, of course. But that's why. Talking about revival stuff, we should really celebrate the likes of Night Dive, who do a really good job of making that stuff playable today very easily with very little effort on the consumer's end, and with Command and Conquer and EA. I think this is really the next step of preservation. I keep saying that word, preservation, but it's cool that companies are paying attention to this and not just expecting the consumer to do it. It's a nice touch, and I think it kind of ties in nicely with the idea of preservation and also revival, because then you have indie guys who play it and suddenly they can, cause I was playing Duke Nukem last night actually, and it has the developer commentary on, which is a really cool feature. So you go up, you press E on the little speaker icon, and they'll say something about how the game was made. And they specifically mentioned how easy it is to make a lot of what they were doing there, which took hours, like weeks and months. But now it's done like that because the tools are there. And it's cool because, you get these indie guys that hear this and they see this and they're inspired by this, and now they can kind of add their own little bit to that genre that has, in theory, been passed and it's dated and it's years down the line.
I mean, that's what they did with Ion Maiden. They took a really bad twin stick shooter and they turned it into a really good first person shooter. Um, built in the same engine, I believe.
It is. It's the exact same
Yeah,
engine.
it's a built engine game. Yeah, yeah, and it plays like a dream. With basically a female Duke Nukem, a wisecracking cop, and it's a lot of fun to play. But
And I believe it's
there's
on
that-
sale for a pretty good deal, so check it out.
I think it's like 50% off.
We're recording this during the Steam Summer Sale, so if any of these revival games catch your interest, be sure to check them out. We are not paid by Steam.
And unfortunately, we're a little late to the cast to let you all know on something I took advantage of, which was Fanatical had Blood fresh supply for $1.
2 in Canada.
Ridiculous price.
True.
Yeah.
I was excited and jumped on that.
But actually, this is a good segue because let's talk retro shooters. And we kind of touched upon this before with Night Dive, but like with New Blood Interactive and Night Dive, especially refitting and remastering a shit ton of old shooters. Turok 2. Obviously, the Gearbox has done Duke, but then I think, does Night Dive have Shadow Warrior as well?
No, Shadow Warrior I think was Devolver.
Was that Devolver?
I'll have to check, but I think they might have put that out. I think they might publish it. Let me check. I know one of them did it, or maybe 3D Realms, because 3D Realms is still actually pretty active.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Then it might be 3D Realms. I think that did Night Dive do System Shock?
They did System Shock.
System Shock, yeah. But thanks to their efforts in that, okay, it's Devolver. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Indigo. But yeah, thanks to those efforts in polishing up and like cleaning up these games and re-releasing them for both fans who knew them, and then now because of their popularity, they're reaching the higher sales chart levels and reaching that new audience that people are inspired by older designs in a genre that's become a little stagnant post 2007, 2008 maybe, where shooters took a drastic turn and sort of started modeling themselves after Halo much more so. And so like now to the point where what was the article? I think it was Nintendo Life, but the game releases on Switch. It's like the Switch is getting another retro shooter. Dusk is coming to Switch, another retro shooter. Like you can tell the contempt in the writer's voice.
The problem with that is that I'm sorry to butt in, but I think the reason why they're so cynical, that kind of stuff, was if the idea of retro has kind of been so hammered into the ground. If you look historically across the backboard of a lot of indie stuff, and this isn't me slaughtering indies, of course, a lot of stuff really tries to sell stuff like it's the game and the concept on, it's a nostalgic retro game. And we've got so many retro platformers and so many, retro RPGs, thanks to RPG Maker, etc., that I can kind of understand why the cynicism is there, but I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt, and maybe they just didn't really look into how scarce the revival shooter scene is on the grand scheme compared to everything else. So I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt. What was that a cynical comment from them? Sure. Was it intentional, or was it a little bit of ignorance? Who knows? I can see Charles deeply researching something.
I can.
No.
I don't know.
Not that. But I mean, it's like I like that you said grand scheme of things. I was gonna look up numbers, but then I thought it was kind of stupid to do that. But it seems like if you're on PC at least, that there's a whole wave of retro shooters that have come. But when you really look at it, it's only happened in the last 3 years, maybe 4. Not counting remakes. Project Aeon, Project Warlock, Dusk, and then what else?
Medieval.
Medieval's the good one.
Medieval, okay, but like it's only been happening the last few years where you're seeing exactly what I was talking about what we were talking about before, where people they like the corridor, or they don't like the corridor shooters. They like going back to their mazes and having health Iron Maiden, and then having health pickups and things like that. So
again, I think it's a culture clash. If you've been brought up on that idea of this is what consists of an FPS, and then suddenly you're given this thing where, and I guess Doom 2016, I would argue, is somewhat of an idea behind Revival, is the levels some become vertical, especially after you played Doom 3, where it's all very linear. And we played a lot of FPSs past 10, 15 years, where it's the same thing, very linear. The level design, while it looks nice, it fits the same kind of format.
Corridor.
And then suddenly you have Revival Shooters and Doom 2016 and some other ones, which I'm sure I'll remember. But for the sake of the example, and Doom 2016 comes out, and suddenly it's not just a linear corridor, it's vertical. And suddenly you can jump up and you have more freedom of expression and movement. And you're like,
amalgamation of old ideas and new tech, or old ideas and new design philosophy, if that makes sense. Like, what if we took the corridor, but instead of just making you walk around it, why don't we stack it up? Why don't we add some exploring to the levels, but we don't make the levels these huge mazes? We kind of like scale them down a little bit, but then give you a whole slew of places to go to. What if we got rid of power armor and let you carry more than 2 weapons?
That would be called Resistance 3. Yeah.
Oh.
But I think it's probably the best example of cultures clashing, because I don't really see a lot of other genres going through such a strong level of revival, and there's such fanfare behind it. Because if you go on Twitter and you follow a lot of people out in the PC, like GG Man Lives, I think he's probably one of the best examples of a YouTube creator that is like at the forefront of what people consider FPS exclusive content. And the amount of times I see people in his comments and they're all saying, well, I've never played anything like this before, and this is cool. It's nice to see that the revival idea and what constitutes the revival is really getting more attention. It's getting more love, and to the point where I can sense that the AAA market is kind of looking at it a bit more in terms of something that's viable. If you look at especially the success of Doom 2016, which wasn't the typical, here's a corridor, walk down it, oh scary, here's a gun, thanks, bye. It's a good movement, but I do worry that we might get in the same place, because there's a lot of revival stuff coming out for the FPS genre from a smaller creators. Like Itch has got a bunch of them. You see a bunch of them pop up on YouTube, on Steam, and we're getting more and more and more and more, because obviously people being inspired by this revival in the genre. So it's almost like, will we kind of repeat the sins of the past and fill that genre up to the point where the revival kind of becomes like suffocating, and we then kind of push it back?
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen, though, because we're talking about market dynamics. So as long as people keep on, well, actually, hang on, I shouldn't say that. At some point, the people who do buy those games are going to get sick of them and stop buying them, and then they're never going to get to the point where they're purchased so much that they rival sales of AAA games.
Yeah,
Doom 64 is on PC now. Great. I'm not buying it until it comes out on GOG, but that's just me. The people who have it, I guarantee you, most of them got it as a pre-order bonus for pre-ordering Doom.
I did.
Doom Eternal.
But it's also £1.16 currently, so
it is. But I mean, I guarantee you that they got it because of. Actually, it's only £1. Anyway, they got it because it was part of pre-order. Most of the people who got it, they didn't. I don't think they played it. The people who played it were the people who already knew who a Doom 64 was, and were interested in it. So you'll have this like kind of crowd of people who are saying, "Oh God, another retro shooter! I'm so tired of these. Like, we're getting so many of them now," and get bored of them. But not to the same point as you get the naysayers of Call of Duty saying, "Oh great, another Call of Duty game that looks exactly like the last one."
Yeah. Dust, you being quiet there. Japanese RPGs, have they went through the same revival process?
I think so, actually. I was gonna mention this. So I didn't do too much PC gaming back in the day with JRPGs. Mine was typically console focused, and so when we got to GameCube, did a pretty good job with it. I feel N64 was okay. I don't remember if I even was playing them back then. But when you get to the 360, I think that it started to fall apart. Now, Lost Odyssey was amazing. A game I highly recommend to everybody. It was very innovative, fantastic. I don't think it performed well enough for Microsoft to want to sequel it, at least not yet. Fingers crossed. Maybe one day they'll change their mind or remaster. I don't know. But anyway, aside from that, I can't really think of a JRPG on that system that really stuck out to me. Like, yeah, Tales of Vesperia was pretty decent, but it didn't really change the game. I don't think it sold well enough to really spark everybody into excitement. What was it? The Last Remnant was fun, but once again, it was a bit niche. Infinite Undiscovery, great at the time, didn't age well as I played it on stream about 6 months ago. But that was another niche game that Square Enix published. And then I don't remember what else, but it felt to me personally like a genre I loved was dying. And then FF13 came out. I wasn't impressed. It was my first Final Fantasy game, and boy, was that a
no.
trip. So I was like, oh no, are we going away from the turn-based JRPGs? Like, is this going to be the end of this? Like, is it going to? It didn't really die, of course. That's a hyperbole. It definitely did a pretty good job on current gen, whether it's on PC or on the PlayStation 4. Prior, back on the PS2 era, where it was great. And then I never had a PS3, so I missed out on that realm. So while they were still continuing and doing well, I had no idea, obviously. But most recently, I would say games like ones that really stick out to me. Yeah, when we talk classics, yeah, I haven't played FF15 yet, Indigo. I got to try it at some point. But I know it's not a classic one, but it is its own style, which will be interesting to check out. But games that stick out to me is, well, not a JRPG. Well, it is, but it's action would be Near Automata. That one did really well, got a lot of eyes on it. But when we're talking classics that I think are responsible for pushing us forward, honestly, I don't think it's like, the best thing in the world, but Persona 5, it went to a huge audience, probably a lot of people that hadn't tried JRPGs before, if I had to guess.
That's one I remember had the biggest hype in the West.
That one had a huge one, and it exploded. And then Dragon Quest 11. Dragon Quest isn't new. Dragon Warrior, all that. It's all old, right? And it's been going on really well for a long time. It's had its own niche following and its main crowd, but compared to the main market, it was always kind of niche. And DQ11 exploded. Like, a lot of people played it. A lot of people talked about it. I think that those games sparked a lot of discussion. I'm not sure, Drexek, on Nier's numbers necessarily. I just know it got a lot of attention, a lot of people talking about it. And then these two in particular, Persona 5 and Dragon Quest 11, I think got a lot of eyes from people that might not have considered JRPGs. And because those are both turn-based, maybe that's a good sign moving forward then. And there are plenty of other good ones, but those two stand out to me as ones that got a lot of eyes.
I think with
in
Persona,
recent years,
a lot of that was the hype surrounding the massive success that Persona 4 was. Not even counting the PC release, which is proven that I think Atlas said is their best launch ever.
Right, that one would have been moot because it's now, right? It succeeded because a lot of that, and everyone's always talked up how good Persona 4 Golden is, but it's been very limited, right? You had to have either a Vita or a PS TV, like I went about
Golden
doing.
was only on Vita, so if you
and
had
the PS TV, because you can play Vita through it. That's it. That's it. Everything else, you're out of luck.
Well, you can play the original on PS2, but it's lacking in a lot of features.
Correct.
And new voice acting. But I think that certainly led to Persona getting hyped up as much as it was on release. And Dragon Quest, as far as I know, because they completely changed the formula of how a Dragon Quest game plays. Dragon Quest 7 was pretty big. Not 7. Was it 7, the PS2 one? Journey of the Cursed King?
I'm not positive.
I think it was 7. I'm pretty sure it was 7, because I think they remastered that as well at some point.
What I do know is those titles used to be completely unforgiving. They were brutal.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. I have to say I'm not too familiar. I played that one that you mentioned, the King one, and Sentinel of the Starry Skies on DS, which was kind of a quasi
that was
MMO-ish type thing. If you connected people, they could join your world and you could do groups and stuff. It was cool.
Yeah, that was Dragon Quest 8, Journey of the Cursed King. That was pretty popular when it came out in PS2. I think it was part of like the 25th anniversary edition or something like that. But that was awesome when it came out. People loved it. And with the newest Dragon Quest, I remember reading a review of it saying like, yeah, there's no party composition. You're playing solo. I'm like, that seems weird. But apparently it works really, really well for a game that size.
I have to say, as a European, Dragon Quest never really hit home in the same way. But on the flip side, obviously, we have Gothic in Europe, where especially in the Slav areas, if you go to anywhere that's Slavic or German, say Gothic, everyone will turn around and go, yeah. Go to America and they're like, hot topic?
Did you just call Slavs?
Slavs, yeah.
Germans? Really?
No, Germans and Slavs.
Oh, German and okay, I didn't
Yeah.
hear the and. I'm like, are you
No,
really?
no,
What?
I'm not gonna say that. I get kicked out of Poland straight away. Take me bread off
My
into this.
ethnic is not of German. We are not of North Balkan, Baltic.
But I think this also kind of leaks into what we're saying is I think a lot of the revival stuff also depends on what region you kind of brought up in. So, for example, a lot of the stuff like, as Imp said, and Drek said, the Gothic, hell yeah, and then we have Risen. Risen wasn't a big hit in America, from what I recall. A lot of the American press just didn't really
review well, too.
Yeah.
It has ever been a big hit in America.
If I remember correctly, to name drop here, I believe Angry Joe slapped the shit out of the Risen series.
Yeah, but Angry Joe also hates Dragon's Dogma because there's not that much fast travel, so...
Well,
all respect to him, but...
there are some complaints with that game.
I like that part.
Well, Irritable Joseph has his quirks.
But like what I was saying is, obviously we have the Gothic remake coming out, which I don't think we mentioned that in the remake episode, but it's almost
we didn't.
A level
What's the
of
story behind
revival.
this?
Well, they had a playable demo of a Gothic remake, and it did so well. They're like, okay, we're gonna do the full game. That's essentially it, because Gothic is such a strong fan base,
massive
in Europe. It's obviously it's Eurojank, but it's probably the poster boy for Eurojank.
Right.
It's crazy popular in Europe, and in some circles over here. Like if you're, I don't want to say hardcore because it kind of gives the wrong impression, but if you're hardcore into role-playing games, you're gonna know what Gothic is. Like the
same with Heroes as well. But like I said, some people in America would see the Gothic remake as maybe a revival title, but the truth is that there hasn't actually been that much departure from these like janky European RPG experiences. Piranha Bytes has still been making games for years and years and years. Not all good, obviously, but
Season 3.
So this kind of leaks into what I was saying about dependent on where you are regionally, that you might see something as a revival title when it's not really. It's just the rest of them games didn't really come over to that part of that part of the world and became popular. It's, I guess Japan would say it's similar to the West. It's kind of weird that there's these huge genres that are very popular in certain countries and don't really resonate or don't cross over. And then there's like that snap point, and suddenly we're like, oh, well, this is kind of old school approach, I guess. This is revival. It's like, no, it's been going on for quite a while now. It's just we as a culture and society kind of took a while to adapt to it.
We're just a little bit ignorant to it and not really latching onto it in the same way, I guess.
But I guess we could also quickly mention something of revival. Which we mentioned previously before the podcast started. We were talking about fan projects. So revivals in MMORPGs, in particular, the old school approach to MMORPGs. And I'm not talking about like the old school approach where you're essentially given a world and you could be whatever. But we're talking about like theme park style. So obviously, World of Warcraft Classic is probably the best example of reviving something through fan power rather than a corporate means. When Blizzard spent all that time closing down the private servers, it really led to a huge pushback. I think Elysium was the biggest one. And there was a lot of notable names that were playing on there, big streamers, big content creators that were playing on Elysium. So they came out in defense. And then that kind of started the ball rolling. It's almost like the word influencer actually meant something there. And people followed them. They're like, okay, well, we all want this to happen. And Blizzard, for the longest time, and famously so, said, you think you want a classic WoW, but you don't. And now we're here.
That was not for WoW. That was for Warcraft 1 and 2.
I'm gonna put it in the same one.
It was also for Classic WoW too. That also came up for.
Yeah, the guy with the ponytail. I can't remember his name. Who's the head of Blizzard now?
I didn't remember that for WoW, but I remember vividly that they said that for Warcraft 1 and 2, and my first reaction was like, "Fuck you! You don't know what I want to play." And I know that because the day that Warcraft 1 and 2 released on GOG, I picked those bad boys up. I played a bunch of Warcraft 1, and I'm like, yeah, this is dated, but guess what? I'm having fucking fun. Fuck you, you arrogant motherfucker. Piss off. Don't tell me what I can and cannot like.
I think it was what's his name? Something Brack? Alan Brack, there we go. So this was years ago. I think this might be in a BlizzCon like 2017. Let me check. 16. So this was just on the release, the announcement for Warlords of Draenor at a Q&A panel, and there were some guy asked, about classic
Here we
WoW,
go.
and he was like, "Oh, you think you want classic WoW, but you don't."
Here you
Obviously
go,
we
Shal.
did.
Here's the receipt.
No, I'm not.
Oh.
I'm not doubting you. I'm just
No,
saying
I know.
I do remember
Just so you can see it.
other Warcraft game.
But I think it does kind of pertain to what we're talking about with revivals. A lot of people have been keeping these classic MMOs alive on the skin of their own backs, like the Warhammer one. There's a bunch of private servers for some really old MMOs that died a long time ago, and I guess we can kind of class them as revivals because obviously they did have somewhat of an influence on the industry, especially WoW Classic. So it's a mixture again. I think we're going around the same theme actually. That preservation and revival are kind of linked, maybe hand by hand, and little pinkies slightly touching each other as they dance around the field.
But also to that point, where you have spin-offs based on not even fan projects, but on I guess passing the torch.
Yeah.
So city builders, and we were talking about this a little bit on stream or before we started the stream, but city builders, the first thing you think of is SimCity because they're a massive juggernaut. SimCity 2013 comes off and kind of kills it for a little while. Cities XL never really manages to pick up that ball, and then you have stuff like Cities in Motion, which aren't really city builders, but they're traffic management simulations. Well, then Colossal Studios, who does Cities in Motion, comes out with City Skylines, and bam, suddenly the popularity of the city builder is massive again because they've been competently able to. I don't know if reviving is the right word for this, because again, it's not like it went away, but now we have a game that we can latch onto that delivers everything that fans want out of it. And so, sort of, you get this thing with games where a franchise dies, and they're sort of like the torchbearer for that particular franchise, and it takes either an indie studio or some fan project to kind of bring it back to the limelight. Stardew Valley in some ways, especially after the
I was going to bring this up too.
Yeah, so especially after the Song of Seasons Harvest Moon naming fiasco, you sort of had Stardew Valley come up, and that's become massively popular. And then I bet you anything that's going to pave the way for the Friends of Mineral Town remake to really capture the hearts of people who are into those kind of.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up too. Is that I think that we can look back at Stardew Valley being the reason why. I personally believe Stardew Valley is perhaps solely responsible for why Friends of Mineral Town is getting ported on the PC.
You think so?
It was definitely gonna get remastered on the Switch or whatever console they had at the time, right? But I think that they saw the success of Stardew Valley and similar games that really sparked, and they went, maybe there is something here. Although they did have an earlier series game. They had one of those spin-off games. It was Astoria Seasons something, and it was that one that had like that manga kind of cameo in it. There's another one on Steam currently.
I don't know.
I think it's like Doraemon or something.
This is out of my ballpark.
But I think it's.
I stopped paying attention to Harvest Moon games a long time ago, or Song of Seasons.
No, so
because Mineral Town was among one of my favorites, I'm very excited for the remake to come out.
Yeah, the last one I played was on the GameCube. It was what is it? It's a Wonderful Life, I think.
Yeah,
that was it. I played 64 in that.
There was Wonderful Life and Song of Seasons or something like that. Something like that. I haven't played much of them. The last one I put a ton of time into was Mineral Town. So
there you go.
Fuck, that's a good game.
We started the cast on Harvest Moon.
I don't have time to go through Harvest Moon right now. I've got too much on the go. I'm only 30 hours into Persona 4, so I've got plenty left.
There is one game I would like to briefly mention. I don't know if I would cast this as a revival, maybe more of a revolution, in a positive manner. So obviously, the Diablo 3 being such a negative
Republic
experience.
of Revolution, that classic PC game
That
where you.
I like that.
You actually know what I'm talking about. I'm impressed.
But Path of Exile. So this was in the shadow of Diablo 3, kind of
Not
failing.
meeting expectations.
Yeah, because it didn't.
I wouldn't say it failed, but it didn't meet expectations.
It subverted expectations.
Oh no. It was a Diablo game in name, but everything else didn't really feel like Diablo. And then you had a lot of people that felt kind of lost. And in between that, Path of Exile was really this beautiful sanctuary for them, because it actually looked like the next step in terms of visuals of Diablo, from Diablo 2. This was like, oh, well, you can kind of see some familiar themes, and then obviously the talent system, the skill system, and how it plays and how it looks. And I don't want to call it a revival, because maybe that's a bit unfair, but it felt like it really continued that genre without going into a completely different space and almost, kind of putting.
I think it helped rejuvenate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty fair to say, because Diablo 4 is clearly looking at some of the stuff that Path of Exile did and was like, I think we'd like some of that. But
I would argue, and once again, not to quote Shell on this, not to sound like it's that kind of elitist perspective, but like the hardcore fans of Diablo likely migrated to Path of Exile when Diablo 3, and I'm sure there's plenty of other Diablo fans that migrated too, but they migrated when it didn't meet what they were looking for.
I think there's a lot of space in there for Path of Exile and Diablo 4 to coexist. But yeah, I will be 2 ticks. I need to take care of something. Don't forget, Diablo 3 wasn't that good. 2 seconds.
But if we're going to be talking about that, like, yeah, so in a sense, I don't know if it is much of a revival as much as it's a spin-off. And again, it sort of deals in with that torchbearer aspect where
Yeah.
you had Diablo 2, as massively popular as it was. Diablo 3 comes out and alienates people. You had Torchlight, which is okay, but then you have Path of Exile, which retains that Gothic overture while taking that D2 formula, making it more playable, and then just giving it to an audience that desperately wants it. So, like, in that sense, it's the continuation of that ARP genre without really being, without really revolutionizing it, I think. Especially because you had other games coming out, like Grim Harvest, or Grim Dawn, I guess.
Grim Dawn was the game, yeah. And
Grim
I'm sure
Dawn.
it wasn't the only one.
Yeah, there were others. I remember we were talking about this on Indigo's Pop, because Grim Dawn was there. Victor Vran was another style game. I already mentioned Torchlight. What was it? What was the Greek one? Same style, but it was the Greek heroes. Help me out here, chat. Greek mythology oriented. It's slipping my mind. But same principle. So you kind of had those there, but obviously none of them reached the same level of popularity that Diablo did.
I think that's a fair point. I never really got into Titan Quest. There you go.
Titan Quest, that's the one. Thank you very much. Titan Quest. Where you quest as a
Indigo
Titan.
delivers.
I figured if anybody would know, he would, and it would just on the tip of my tongue. But yeah, so what was I saying though? No, you were saying something. What am I thinking of?
Oh, I was gonna say it's interesting too on this discussion, because it's like near the back end of like genres I'm into is like I've definitely RTS is at the bottom of my list, and then like not ARPGs, but those like ARPGs with like click to move. I have gotten, I don't know. I was never I definitely was never the target audience to it, but I love watching what's going on. I love being able to look at the trends and things like that going on with it, and seeing it continues good, even if I don't play it or enjoy it that much. Same with RTS. Like, it's neat seeing it continue.
Mm-hmm.
So I can, sit back and I kind of watch it from this, I guess, this perspective of not playing it so much as I still kind of keep an eye on it, see what people are up to.
Right.
Love them or hate them, a new Diablo game is an event. The genre was called Diablo clones for years before it eventually became action RPGs. Similarly, we had Diablo clones, and then with World of Warcraft, obviously you had World of Warcraft clones, etc. Right? And you're correct. Brand names definitely carry a lot of weight.
Yes,
World of Warcraft clones. Sorry, it's World of Warcraft killers, the WoW killers.
Yeah, see, I didn't even think of that they were cloned after Diablo, because I just said that for Doom, and for whatever reason, I didn't connect in
Yeah.
my head that Diablo went through the same thing. So yeah, fair point.
Mhm.
I think you can even say that Diablo 3 is a clone. Because it wasn't obviously Blizzard North, it was a completely different team.
Well, of course it was. It's a clone with no soul.
Yeah. So it's a
No, a
soulless
clone with no soul was,
It's a
and then
Ginger Diablo.
and then they and then what did they call?
Diablo.
So, so that raises a question: what's a clone of a soulless clone called?
Clone's
What?
Clone, that beautiful wrestler from YouTube that everyone used to meme the shit out of.
I mean, close, I guess. I was thinking Diablo Immortal.
Oh,
Oof.
I forgot about
It's the
that.
clone of a soulless clone.
Good job, Dusty. You just reminded us of something that we tried very hard to forget.
Yep.
Oh no. That's actually
Copy of a
one
copy
thing
of a
I would
copy.
say is the mobile, kind of going back to what we were talking about a little bit about preservation and revival, is there seems to be some games, especially like Raid Shadow Legends, which kind of, you could say arguably acted as, a lot of the stuff that came out on mobiles was like revival, somewhat turn-based stuff because of the limitations of the mobile platform. I mean, it's a pretty big stretch, but I guess you could argue, some would argue, that it's a part of the revival sphere in general. I can't say too much because, frankly, I don't play mobile games. Like, I just don't have any interest in playing games on my mobile. If I have my mobile in hand,
Same.
it's to read something other than playing
Yeah,
a
I don't
video game.
actually have any
But
games on my phone.
Yeah, I mean, the only ones I have are choice of games or games, I guess. Yeah, choice of games. So they're basically like light RPG, choose your own adventure titles. Oh, and
Nice.
crosswords, because I like crossword puzzles.
Oh, well, that's fine.
I'm a hardcore gamer.
we're all hardcore.
I
But
rank YouTubers by how many raid sponsor offers they get.
hey, they get like $2,000 per sponsor for that, apparently. So
You know what? For that
sign me
kind of
up.
money, would I sell my soul, knowing that I don't do reviews of mobile games? Probably
I mean,
Exactly.
not. But still.
I mean, I'll give them this. At least it's not as unethical as BetterHelp.
True.
Woo!
This is going into some YouTube deep diving, which I guess is also a part of revival. I'm trying to think of like genres off the top of my head that have recently received revivals, and there's nothing really popping out. I guess
have to look at
survival
my
horror
list.
kind of had one, a
There
little
you
bit.
go.
A little bit, but like that's partially, I think, due to the amount of shovelware horror games that are just available. Like, I would love if we had another mainline Silent Hill game made by the Japanese devs, but we're never
Yeah.
gonna have that happen. Meanwhile, like Resident Evil is thriving because of the remakes that they've been putting out, which has sparked a lot of interest in that again. Or Resident Evil 7 too.
Yeah,
Uh,
and now the hype leading up to 8, right? Village. So
Yep.
we'll see if that continues the trend of this survival horror going, and hopefully it does really well and maybe spark some interest in other developers giving it a shot.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more.
Yeah, for sure.
A revival in old school FPS.
It's not even my
Revival.
genre, but it's another one I don't want to see disappear. More choice is a good thing.
One thing I have to say I don't like about revival stuff is it makes me feel very old, because everything now we've got past 80s nostalgia and now we're moving into 90s nostalgia. Like everything revivals from the 90s, and I'm like, oh no.
My 80s nostalgia is based on the fact that I wasn't actually born in the 80s and I know nothing about it, but I'm an outsider looking in and I love everything about the 80s, because the more I engage with things of the 80s, the more I'm like, this is perfect for me. But now I'm seeing a lot of things that I remember as a kid and just like,
Uh-oh.
okay, so let me give you an example. I was listening to Disney music on YouTube because I do that sometimes. And I just realized that Susan Egan, the woman who did the voice of Megara in Hercules, about a month ago, she put out a video where she did her number from Hercules. I won't say I'm in love, throughout her house, but she redid the animations and like the movements with like objects in her house. And it was fantastic. She had like some other singers go in on Zoom to do the backing vocals. And she sounds just like she did back in the day. And that's when I realized that she recorded that song 23 years ago. And I'm just like, well, fuck, I remember when this came out. God damn it.
My revival moment came when Wick was playing Dusk, and she was asking about like double jumps and like control jumps and stuff. Oh, sorry, I was when I was playing Half-Life. The crouch jump, and she was like trying to jump over the pipes, and she was just trying to do the normal jump and double jump. And I was like, no, you have to do this. No, like hold down control and jump. And she looked at me and she was like, why? I was like, oh God, I'm so old. I think that's probably the best way to kind of capitalize on this idea of nostalgia. We get to feel young again by playing these games, and as soon as we close it, we see our reflection in the screen, and we're like,
Yeah.
oh no, I'm not 14, I'm not 15, I'm not 11, I'm old now. What's going on?
Yeah. Like that creaking in my knee is not going away anymore.
No.
At least we're not gaming with discs as much anymore, because just like the discs, we get more scratches with age.
You know what? You joke, but discs are
No,
the
I do.
optimal way to play games now.
I still use discs.
Hey, Dust, do you wanna try the Shadow Warrior demo? I can lend you mine.
I'd have to use an external. I'd actually have to use an external.
Disk
what do you
drive?
call it? Optical drive. Yeah.
Yeah, we had to use Wick's sister's old computer. It's a Windows XP system with a disk tray and floppy disk drive. So we've been putting some stuff in there and looking at the content. I know. XP.
That's when you know it. That's when you know you're old too. Is when you got to pay extra to get an optical drive put in your PC.
I was playing around with Stardock curtains on my computer, and basically it's just like kind of skins the computer. So it has different. Yeah, it's basically an overlay. And there was one, and I'm like, it's Windows XP, and I put it on. I'm like, wow, I remember all this. The big blocky buttons, the blue and green colors. And then I realized, like, I hadn't seen something like that on my computer in like 20 years. Or like, not quite 20 years, like more like 15, but like just, ugh.
I guess that's the ultimate message of revival shooters. It makes us... Not revival shooters. I keep saying revival shooters. Revival titles.
Revival genres.
Yeah, it makes us feel young again and relevant again. And then we realize that it's just a flash in the pan.
We weren't relevant in the first place.
True. One thing I would like to kind of focus on as like a final part is so obviously we mentioned cycles. So genres they're popular, and then the styles of genre, sorry, they're popular and then they fade. And a lot of that
I got one for you.
Often, what is this one?
I'm gonna predict that within about, I don't know, 3 to 5 years. It's a bit of time, but I think we're gonna see in about 3 to 5 years Battle Royale fade out in favor of something. I don't know what.
I think they've already started to fade out.
But I think they're gonna fade.
I know that they're still hugely popular, or almost completely. I don't know, because I think Fortnite will stick around in the same way World of Warcraft will. Maybe the other ones, sure, but I think you'll see kind of a process where Fortnite still remains. Because, I mean, let's be honest, it's a free-to-play game. It's a great place for kids to... Yeah, I think the importance of Fortnite in general, and I know it's easy to kind of rival on it, but the fact is it's a free-to-play game that has cross-play, so, if you're at school and, your friends... is it still popular? Winster? Come on now. Of course it's still popular. And we're starting to see like corporations input their products into that. Like we have the what's the guy who did the Batman films? Christopher Nolan. He's having his trailer in Fortnite, and we had the Star Wars event. So I don't think Fortnite will be disappearing anytime soon. I think the Battle Royale genre in general will be fading as a whole, but I think Fortnite is going to be around for a fair while yet, the same way Minecraft still remains popular.
Fortnite's not going anywhere. The genre might like waver a little bit, but Fortnite is not going to dip in popularity anytime soon. It's sort of like we're experiencing with Fortnite, kind of like what kids in the early 90s went through when Doom came out, to be perfectly honest.
And early 2000s with WoW.
Yeah, except that like Fortnite didn't invent the Battle Royale, but they took it and did they run with it.
It was definitely reinventing the wheel, I'd say.
Yeah. Without needing a Daisy on your computer to that unfinished gem.
Yeah.
And I'll say this about what do you call it? I'll say this about Daisy. I think that the closest thing to a spiritual successor to that even though it's obviously not. I think any chance DayZ had at recovering from that open world kind of survival aspect is probably Escape from Tarkov. I think that might be what did it in. And it's funny because they're completely unrelated, right? They're not the same thing.
Well, I think Tarkov takes the psychological elements of DayZ and implements it into a different situation. So when you're playing Tarkov, especially playing solo, there's always that kind of, oh, the next move could be, my character's last, and you have that risk it all kind of element to it. If you die as your private military guy, you lose everything on your body. So it was the same with DayZ. You could just lose everything in an instant. So you can have all that work, you could spend ages grinding up all that great stuff, go out, and then one mistake and you're dead, and that's it. So I think DayZ really has them memories and history behind it. But Tarkov's kind of took the good parts of that and put it into a really cool, workable experience. By the way, because DayZ's broken as fuck.
Well, not Battle Royale. It is amazing.
It's still in early access, and he's just like, I gotta go. I'm a grenade, baby. You don't want me on a project. I have an idea, and it blows up, and then I gotta go. I'm not here to see it stick out to the end. That's a bit of an issue.
But the point I was trying to make before was, obviously, these genres do die off eventually. It can be down to a number of things: changing consumer habits. Maybe there's too much in the genre itself, which is the thing I want to highlight. Is when do we get to the point where, and I think revival shooters are probably going to get there first, where, kind of going back to what the guy said on the Nintendo thing, yet another retro shooter. When do we get to that point and we kind of find ourselves submerged in too many of them, and we kind of then
to where
move on
we
to the next
pick
thing?
up that perspective, I guess.
Yeah, like when do we get bored again, or when do we want our consumer habits change for something else?
I think that gets to that point when we, like us, it's like how Dusty said, it's out, like we're the target audience when we look at it and think like, well, this looks pretty much just like every other one that we've gotten so far. It's not new, it's not interesting. I think that's the point where we just kind of realize and say, you know what, this is too much. It's not all that different from when how many MMOs came out shortly after WoW, after like Burning Crusade or Wrath of the Lich King that tried to dethrone it. And you look at it, it's like there's so many MMOs to pick from. None of them are WoW.
And we got the same with obviously the success of Medal of Honor, and then all them World War II shooters, and then all the Modern Warfare shooters. As Winston said, we're starting to even see a huge uptick in cyberpunk games in general. That just takes aesthetics, obviously, not based on the RPG. And there's just so much of it. I have to say, going back to what I was talking about previously, when I did the Steam demos, I did that night where I was streaming a bunch of FPSs. So I played Gloomwood, which I thought was a really fresh take. I'm very excited for that. I think that's a really cool direction of revival shooters, where it's not about the speed and it's not just here's an arena. It's something that's actually a revival, but in a different way. It's closer to Thief, as they say at New Blood Interactive. It's Thief with guns, which is a pretty cool marketing thing. Ultra Kill, which was a lot of fun. And then the third one I played was Hot, which is apparently Czech for hint or something. And while I liked it, I found myself thinking this plays a little bit too much like Dusk in a way. And I guess that was a little bit intentional. But I found myself subconsciously thinking that quite often. And I enjoyed the game, but I did...
And if it wasn't for the horse, though...
The horse is pretty cool.
The horse and the motorcycle.
Yeah. But I did find myself kind of going, okay. And I was subconsciously comparing them to other revival shooters and thinking, is this as good? And I feel like this might become more of a poignant thing as we get more and more of these. It's the same with a game called Shrine. Now, Shrine is free on Steam. And it sells itself as a revival shooter. I played it. And it I don't want to be too harsh because it's a one-guy project, so, if this guy ever sees it, I'm sorry, there's no ill intent towards you, but it felt like it was trying to go off the coattails of selling itself as an old-school FPS experience, and when I played it, it didn't really feel like it. It just felt like someone's idea of one, and that idea might be a little bit tainted by the notion of, if it's old school, it's got to be in an open area and fast, and the enemies just come running at you. I was like, I think that might be a problem that we see more and more of. And Shrine 2 is coming out as well. So hopefully you learn, from that experience of making the game and can make it a little bit more expansive. But I do worry that revival shooters will get to the point where they're all just copying each other, much like they did back in the day, and then we'll get bored of it again.
And that's sort of the point where it teeters and
Yeah.
the genre dies.
Rest in peace. But yeah, I guess it's all to do with cycles, right? I don't know. I mean, that being said, I have to say, sorry for butting in, Dust. I have to say,
don't worry.
I think there are some games that you can always play, and it's always just like instantly fun. Like Half-Life, I can still go back to Half-Life, and it doesn't matter how many of the shooters I've played, Half-Life will always remain just hugely enjoyable. Every single section of it. Well, not Zempa, obviously. Ugh.
Well, I mean, Zen's pretty awesome in Black Mesa, if a little long, I think.
I love it.
Too long, but...
Dust, what was your thought before I brutally slammed you to the floor and silenced you?
You're gonna wish you'd done it again after you hear this. So I saw a big list of sales that are like different games on the Steam sale you should look out for. These games are great. And one of them, that they listed was Metro Exodus. And then it was accompanied by your favorite quote, because we're talking about revivals and all that. Your favorite PC gamer one-liner.
Oh, no. Okay.
Oh, no.
It's Stalker. This game is Stalker on rails.
Yeah.
Exodus is not Stalker.
My problem with that is that it's the same problem with anybody aping anything cyberpunk and saying it's a cyberpunk game. Look, like robotics on a person, really tall skyscrapers, and neon colors and synthwave does not make something cyberpunk.
It's Dark Souls. It's this.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, I saw that and went, oh. But I giggled because I knew I could bring that up later. And whenever I see it, I laugh because I remember that day Linko went off the rails and blasted that comment.
I actually got on my I can't remember what the character was called. I made this stupid character for some silly Twitter content where I was like some Slavic guy reviewing video games and talking about them. And I think I sent a message to him and I was like, "Oh, if you say this game is like Stalker again, you will feel the wrath of the Slavic nations." And yeah. Stupid. Metro Exodus is not Stalker. Stop it.
We'll have to pin that in the comments for this this video.
Praise Bioshock in space. There's another one. I guess these kind of comparison points usually fall down to like, I hate to say it, but it usually falls down to the media, because the media ones that usually use it, like the Dark Souls one.
100% what it is, yeah.
Like I remember 100%. Breath of the Wild, there was one article, and it was like, "Oh, this is like the Dark Souls, the Zelda franchise." And I was like, how?
What?
How? It's like...
Jedi Fallen Order. It's the Dark Souls Star Wars game.
Yeah.
I heard that all the time.
It's a strange trend.
If you can die in 2 to 3 hits, it's a Dark Souls game. There you go.
Apparently. Did you know that Mario is the Dark Souls of platformers? You can die in 1 hit if you don't have any power-ups.
With the Star Wars one, though, I will say that Star Wars game was trying. It'll be like Dark Souls at times, but I thought... the problem with it, this is kind of going off topic, was... they were trying to be accessible Dark Souls, and in the same way, they made everything so one-dimensional that it wasn't fun. Every single boss fight was pretty much the same. There was no variation or real depth in the combat. So they were trying to make a Dark Souls that was accessible and put it in the Star Wars world, which is fine. But yeah, the whole "it's like Dark Souls" is ugh.
Yeah, I mean, it's this the compare. It's like the same thing we got with Skyrim back in the day. It's Skyrim, but with guns.
Oh, I've got a genre that did die.
Oh yeah,
I've got a genre that did die. Yeah, I mean, it's still there, but for all intents and purposes, it fell out of the popularity. Music games, and I mean the ones with the instruments, the Guitar Heroes and Rock Bands. They're still technically Rock Band 4, I think, on the 1 and PS4, but they're a shell of what they used to be, right? Well, remember, they used to be awesome and innovative, and then there were way too many, and then splat.
Yeah, well, that's because of the oversaturation. Like, we went from Guitar Hero, where you're playing these real, like, iconic tracks, and then some more contemporary stuff. And I will say that I think there is genuinely a lot of people out there that have had their musical tastes defined by that genre in the same way that I'm sure Grand Theft Auto also defined a lot of musical tastes. But the problem with the music games was there was too many of them, and they kept trying to shove new hardware in your hands, so it was very expensive. Like I remember one was
It was not accessible. The Rock Band bundle when Rock Band 1 came out was like $180.
I got that.
You needed 3 plastic sets of instruments plus a microphone in order to get the most out of it.
I bought that Rock Band bundle.
So did I.
Fun though.
I did too.
They're fun games, but I mean, like, it's the same kind of thing with DDR. In the you can play DDR at home, but you need the accessories to go with it. Yeah. Not everyone's willing to buy the accessories. It's why Star Wars Connect.
I want DDR back. That was fun.
Indigo made a good point as well with the compatibility. If you want to play them games now, you have to keep your your old consoles hooked up and ready. And it's a shame because what was the company called? Mad Catz. Mad Catz kind of bankrupt themselves trying to publish and make the actual music, the peripherals for Rock Band 4, 3.
They made a bunch of them actually. I think Rock Band 4 they did as well.
Yeah. Basically, they overproduced stuff and it was sitting in a warehouse because the game undersold. You can actually,
in fact, let me do a quick little price check for you all.
Okay, but then the other part of it too is that what made those games really restrictive is that if you wanted new music, you had to buy it, which again added costs. And I can understand why you needed to do that and why they wouldn't let you upload your own music, the same way you can with AudioSurf or something. But
unfortunately, I think COVID messed it up. Because I can only buy 5 collectible options from $249.99. But I think at one point they were like $30-$40, and this is years after they were out of production. They had a huge surplus.
Well, there you go.
But apparently, Beat Saber as a revival. I'm not sure if you can call Beat Saber revival.
Well, I mean, I guess in terms of the more like interactive rhythm games, like maybe the evolution of DDR.
Then I'd argue that AudioSurf was a revival in the same sense. Like, I think that, again, going based on the premise of this entire podcast was that these games never went away. They just lost popularity. So I guess, in a sense, but I'm hesitant to put Rock Band in the same genre as I am Beat Saber because rhythm games are there, but Rock Band was something very unique.
Yeah, I was thinking DDR to Beat Saber might be like considered the evolution there. Rock Band, though, no. The music games were the music games themselves.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've covered everything.
Oh, actually, they did evolve, Shell. It did evolve. Sorry.
Witcher? You're gonna say Witcher combat?
No, although that might be eligible. No, I was gonna say they evolved into something that I may start playing around with again. Rocksmith, if you remember those. Ones where you would plug an actual guitar in.
Yeah, the difference.
Play the charts.
That was meant to teach you how to play guitar.
Yeah, correct. A learning tool in a game. It's in the traditional sense.
Exactly.
And I may stream that as like a warm-up thing before my streams in the future. However, I won't be doing it on Twitch because of DMCA's. I'll find another place.
DLive. I want Dust to bring back the singing.
Everybody subscribe to Dust's OnlyFans account, $5 a month, and you get exclusive content of him practicing guitar,
playing rock
sultry tunes of Aerosmith and Van Halen. Hannah,
there we go.
Oh god. Well, I think we touched everything we were hoping to touch. Probably not the best thing to say, considering what we just said.
Now we bring up VR games, but that's its own thing.
Thank you for that.
Well, have you got any closing comments on revivals?
They were an overrated act, and I'm very happy that they were released from the WWE because the writing staff. How do you go out there and go after LOD like that? That was pathetic. No, sorry, that was New Order, not Revival. Revival was a good act. Revival was an awesome tag team, and it sucks that they were released. I take it back. I got them confused with the Ascension. The Ascension sucked.
Well, there we go. So that was Charles' take on current WWE politics and their releasing of tag teams. Dust? Dust just has nothing to say on WWE.
I got nothing. I mean, we didn't mention VR, but VR is such a niche that I don't think it's ever really died or revived at this point. So we'll keep an eye out on that.
I think that's more emergent stuff still. I think in general we can all agree that while...
I will say this, though. What would kill World of Warcraft and a lot of the MMO models is if we can get to that level of VR MMOs that we're not talking Orbis VR, which is still a neat project, but it's not what I'm talking about. If we get to where like all these animes and other shows are that take place in a VR kind of setting, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the tech gets to that level, I think at that point you'll see an evolution in MMOs. Until then, I think they're going to be more or less the same for a long time to come.
Didn't Dust just describe that film with Jared Butler in Gamer?
Yeah.
That's a horrible
I
future. I refuse to be part of a future where Ludacris is the saving grace of society. Because you could say that is Ludacris.
Oh,
But yeah, so revival genres. I think it's always going to be the repeating cycle, you know, that they come back and then they'll disappear, and I'm sure in 20 years' time, 30 years' time, they'll come back again, which is pretty fitting considering the whole COVID situation. That seems to keep coming back. So, I don't know. In terms of dead genres, nothing's truly dead. I think we can agree that. But I think when you kind of see a genre...
Die.
And
Exactly.
you certainly don't see a dead genre in what are called the video games at your local restaurants and gas stations.
Oh, what?
They'll have slot machines and they have it marked as video games.
Oh,
Which is
okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
And also shovelware, because, you know,
Mhm.
just go to a bit. There you go.
I think shovelware is
5
kind of
cents.
an in between between
5 cents,
the...
fellow.
It's like a tribute act more. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess it's like a tribute act. Yeah.
No.
Dead genres aren't ever really truly dead. I think revival stuff is kind of intrinsically linked with quote unquote dead genres, so they're always going to be relevant, they're always going to be there. I think it all kind of comes down to the message we always try to preach is video game preservation. It's important. It's cool to see EA recognize that with Command and Conquer. It still blows my mind that Command and Conquer was happy to be thrown into the mobile gulf and not kept easily playable on modern systems. But here we are,
and I'm
and it's
hoping
there.
that this is enough of a success that the next one they do is a bundle of Red Alert 2 and Tiberian Sun, because then I'm going to be all over that.
Cross our
Easily.
fingers.
Fingers
So
crossed, man.
any closing comments, Mr. Shao?
Party hard.
Wow.
Not the game. I don't care for the dev for that game, but I mean, it's a fun game. But no, party hard. Live life and enjoy yourself.
PlayStation Jam Pack discs. That is the best way to party.
Do I have closing comments relevant to the episode, however? So you should have been more forward with that. Yeah, I mean, like, I like the rebirth that we're going through with role-playing games, especially since we're getting a lot of the enhanced editions of the old games that I like, and we're getting new games in that style that I like. I'm going to keep riding this wave until I possibly can, and love it until it goes out of fashion again, until whatever else comes out. But I think also we have the unique perspective of being able to look at this because we're not isolated in that AAA sphere, and that we're able to kind of see these trends pop up and down. And we have our fingers on the pulse a little better in that when revival games or tribute games or these sort of old school throwbacks come up, they're immediately more visible. And I think that just makes gaming a lot better for us, where we're kind of clamoring for those kind of genres. So for us, it doesn't even die in the same way that it does die for others, where they're just kind of ignorant to the existence of these things.
Mr. Dust?
I will say that some of these revivals have come from big studios. Some of them have come from like people making mods, and some have come from independent solo developers. So if you're in that category, awesome. Keep on going. Keep on keeping on with these trends. And you never know. If you put together a good enough game, I might even name drop you. That's right. Concerned Ape is the name I'm dropping today.
Wow, look at that.
For those that don't know, Stardew Valley.
The promo man. The hype man. I think...
Right, so keep on keeping on. And yeah, I like this trend we're seeing with RPGs as well. So
yeah, I think the RPG one's
see how it
probably
goes.
the most beneficial for the industry on the whole, because we're now moving away from typically modern day Western RPGs, and we're kind of going back to the classical roots, and I feel people are a lot more open to that now, and they're more interested. I've saw so many people getting hyped for Baldur's Gate 3 that never mentioned anything about old RPG systems. So it's cool to see. And it's the same with FPS. Dusk, I feel, has really opened up a lot of eyes to what FPSs used to be like. And there's a lot more interest. Gloomwood seems to be going in a similar direction. Ultra Kill as well. I really like this revival scene, and I'm happy to buy all that shit. That's it.
I really want to see where it goes. I
Yeah.
really want to see where it goes, RTSs especially, and see how those come back. But yeah,
I'm hoping that we live in the world one day where we have revival esports. We're gonna have Unreal Tournament back, Command and Conquer, and Minesweeper. And
when are we gonna get a revival of the arena shooter? When are we gonna get our Unreal Tournament?
Well, we're getting one until Epic start making all that Fortnite money.
Okay, fine. Fine. Can we get a non-Epic Unreal Tournament clone that is popular and that I can jump into and enjoy instead of just playing bots by myself?
And preferably one that Tencent doesn't have a hand in too. I'd prefer that too. They don't have one yet, but I'd rather them not.
Now we're being unrealistic. Tencent.
We should just LAN Unreal Tournament on stream one night. Just get a whole bunch of people who have it and just play, or not LAN, but like the what do you call it? The service that I guess Game Ranger works too. But whatever.
Yeah, Game Ranger still works.
Yeah, we should figure that out sometime. There might be some difficulties with LAN, so probably wait till Linko's back in the UK.
God bless the Queen. Yeah. But anyway, sweet dreams, everyone. It's not even nighttime. Someone's saying sweet dreams. Have a good rest of your Sunday.
Lunchtime for me.
Thank you for joining me, Charles. Thank you for joining me, Dust. You can catch their channels. Get ready for this. We have commands. Of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, you probably won't see this. And if you're the guy who disliked us on YouTube, you motherfucker.
If you're watching this on YouTube, you've already probably followed at least one of the links there, because at some point these are more than likely going to be hosted on my channel as well as Linko's.
Yep. So remember, if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel and give us a like. Don't be that asshat with the downvote, or I'll downvote your mom.
Oh, well, wow. Too bad. Your ma jokes coming out.
Already on it.
Back to 2005.
Xbox 360. I'm coming in tight. But anyway, sweet dreams, sweet days. Have a good dinner if you're in Charles time zone. Look after yourself.
It's only 1 o'clock.
Dinner is lunch, man. I'm telling you, we don't have lunch in the UK. Dinner, tea. It's breakfast, dinner, tea. That's the end of it. That's it.
What are you, a hobbit? Like, no.
Breakfast, dinner, tea. That's all end it. On a controversial point.
Yeah.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
See everybody. And thanks again for hanging out in our corner of the internet.
I keep forgetting about that. Fuck.